I got to jump right in because I've got a lot to say and not enough time to say it in, but this will not be a typical sermon. However, I do want to give you an overview of the CrossPointe story and tell you about people on our timeline that have helped us all along the way. This is going to be fun. Are you ready? One of my favorite stories in the Bible comes from Genesis chapters 37 through 50. I alluded to this a little bit last Sunday in my excitement because I knew it was coming this week, and I tried to hold back and couldn't last week. But at 17 years old, God began to prepare Joseph for absolute greatness. Joseph was a gifted dreamer, a visionary, because he could see things in dreams that would ultimately, eventually, actually come to pass. Now, I want to elaborate on some things, and I want to emphasize some things. And this is one of the first sermons probably in 6 months that I've not used any other resources except what's up here, so this could be dangerous. Okay, it's just all what God, I just sat down and started writing this sermon, and I didn't pull from any of my books or any of my resources. I just went for what God put in my heart. So I'm going to just say it like it is, and there's no filter here today, okay? But having a dream does not mean that you're personally ready to experience the fulfillment of your dream. Dreams take time to become realities. You see, God plants a dream in you, but often has to raise you up to a spiritual level where you can facilitate that dream. In other words, God will not give you a dream equal to your ability. He gives dreams and visions that are bigger, much, much bigger than your ability. He does that so that you'll lean into Him all along the journey and all throughout your life. He does that. If your dream is not bigger than your ability, then God didn't give it to you. God doesn't give dreams that you can handle on your own. He always is going to give you a dream that's bigger than you, okay? Because faith is always going to be a factor with God. The time it takes for a dream to be realized, that span from the time the dream is given until the time the dream is realized, that span is filled with challenges, obstacles, and overwhelmingly difficult days. Back to Joseph's story. One day, Joseph, at 17 years old, he had a couple of dreams. And the interpretation of the dreams were that one day his 11 brothers would bow down before him. Years later, that's exactly what happened, and most of you know that story. But Joseph, being young and a bit naive, he didn't know any better than to just share that with all of his 11 older brothers. And they were already jealous because the Bible says that Joseph was the favorite of his father Jacob. And I'm thinking it was probably because, Jacob was an old guy and now he's got this brand new baby. And I know what it's like to favor, when you're an old guy and you got this brand new baby in your family. And you kind of forget about, the one that was your firstborn son. And you just focus completely on the new baby. And that's okay because my firstborn son has forgotten about me and he focuses on the newborn baby too. But Joseph, being young and a bit naive, he didn't know any better than to share, his dream with those jealous brothers. And I want to tell you what I've learned about sharing your dream with the wrong people. The wrong people will laugh at you. They'll get angry. They'll be jealous that God has a plan for you that's different than His plan for them. And it doesn't matter what God's plan for you is. If it's not theirs, they're bothered by that. In fact, people with no vision or dream of their own will go out of their way to sabotage your dream. When Joseph told his brothers that he dreamed one day that they would bow down to him, they were furious and they began to plot against the little brother. One day Joseph is sent by his father Jacob to the fields to check on his brother. They see him coming in the distance, and he's so far away when they first spot him that they begin to plot a plan to kill their baby brother. They were that jealous and that conceived with, that overwhelmed with envy. But then they got to thinking and they rationalized together that if we get the blood of our baby brother on our hands, we'll never be able to live through that. And our father Jacob is so obsessed with our baby brother, our guilt will override us. So they decided to sell him as a slave. And then they go home and they tell their father that he was attacked by a lion and drug off into the bush, and this was all that was left of him, kind of a thing. A very dysfunctional family, as I told you last week. Joseph ends up in Egypt as a slave. His life there's like a roller coaster ride, up and down, a little bit of good, a whole lot of bad. He was maligned, accused of rape, one that he did not commit, thrown in prison and forgotten about. But ultimately, God used the gift that He gave Joseph to bring him to a prominent place in the land of Egypt. Now, let me talk about a few lessons that we've learned from Joseph's unconscionable journey as a person that has the touch of God upon his life. The first one is quite obvious, and it's one that I've also learned the hard way. Be selective who you share your dream with, because everybody that's with you may not be for you. Did you know there are some mean people out there who are very good at covering up just how nasty they actually are, and they have the audacity to call themselves Christians? The problem is, I ain't mad. I'm trying to preach this with, I feel pretty good about this. I'm not mad at all. But the problem is they're attracted to gifted people because they think if they stay close, there may be something in it for them. But when they realize God's plan for you is promotion, mean people will often attack you, especially when they figure out that your ascent is not their ascent, your promotion is not their promotion. It's the way that people are, and I don't understand it sometimes, but you've seen it as well. Now, let me elaborate personally about CrossPointe. We have well over 100 middle and high school students that usually show up on Wednesday nights here for squad at CrossPointe Church. And I'm telling you, I'm partial, I know, but Josh does a phenomenal job. He's an incredible leader of pouring into the squad team, those students, middle and high schoolers. And I've seen this happen. I've seen some kids, some students, make really bad choices, and it wrecks their leader. He'll come in moping, and I know something bad has happened, and eventually he'll share a story with me of some poor choice that a student has made, and he's just devastated by it because he knows they're going to be devastated by it. Josh teaches powerful life principles in hopes that our students will lean into faith. And I want to share one that I remember that he shared in a series not all that long ago, and I'm going to reiterate it kind of from my perspective. But here it is, and this doesn't just apply to students, but to everybody in the room. You should be very strategic who you invite into your inner circle of friends. Now, you need to establish a standard, a checklist, that your inner circle must meet before you let them come alongside you and do life with you. Now, you don't tell them that you're putting them through a checklist, right? You don't go, sorry, dude, you can't be a part of my life because you only check 2 out of 4 boxes. Don't do that. We're called to be kind to everybody and to love everybody, but when you got to be selective about who you choose to do life with. I mean, really do life with. And I suggest you determine 3 or 4 requirements for the people that you invite into your circle. Everyone's list is going to be a little bit different based on how God wired you, but I can give you the first box that everybody in the room needs to check before you invite people into your life. Here it is, a Jesus follower. I'm talking about the closest of the close. I'm talking about those intimate conversations and those family vacations and all that kind of stuff. People that you're going to do life with, they need to be Jesus. They need to have a common faith to you. Now, I've observed that much like Joseph at 17 years old, students especially tend to live in the moment, and living in the moment will bite you on the butt. Anybody else know that? It absolutely will. You see, the choices you make today will frame your future. And I'll tell you all the time, God gave us all free will. You're free to make whatever choice you want, but you're not free from the consequences of those choices. The Lord said this is the anthem of the day right here. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. You need to realize if you invite people into your inner circle, people that you're going to do life with and be the closest with, if you do that without checking the right boxes, those people can slow down, impede, block, or delay the plans that God has for your life. God has a plan for you, but you can screw that up with bad decisions. Proverbs 13:20 says, a companion of fools suffers harm. Make sure the decisions you make today, you're willing to live with tomorrow, because they're going to follow you. Now, let me give you a practical illustration. When I was 15 years old, I was in high school in Sanford, Florida, Seminole High School, and one day I heard that there were a group of Christian students meeting for FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and I walked in during a lunch break to the FCA meeting there at our high school. And there was a girl in the group that really impressed me. She actually knew her Bible. She had a very sweet disposition, and she was just funny as all get out. And over time, we got to be very good friends. We played tennis together, and then she found out that I was in a band with my older brother and a few more guys at our high school that she also knew. And she wanted to come hear us play and sing. Well, she showed up with the captain of our cheerleading team. She had instant credibility with us. You bring the captain of the cheerleading team to hear a band practice, and you're in, you know. So before the night was over, we handed those two girls a microphone and said, hey, they were really interested. And we said, why don't y'all give it a go and see what it's like to sing. And it did not go so well. You can love Jesus and still have pitch problems. It was tough. Here's what we found out. When you give someone a microphone, it's really hard to get it back. Thus the reason we will never give Darrell Williams a microphone. We remained very good friends, me and this young lady. We both loved Jesus, and we often talked about God's plans for our future. She graduated that summer. Before she left for college, she knocked on my door in Sanford, Florida. And we stood out on the front porch and we said our goodbyes and we cried and all that kind of stuff. We stayed in touch for a while, but eventually we disconnected kind of like you do with your high school friends. Now, I'd not seen her in over 20 years, but one day I walked into a Christian bookstore that displayed the top 10 bestsellers right up front, and there she was, Lisa Harper, that sweet, funny, full-of-life girl that I hung out with in high school. And maybe some of you that follow, especially large women's conferences, have heard of Lisa. She's a highly sought-after speaker. In fact, she was recently a keynote speaker at the Hillsong Color Conference in Australia. And there were tens of thousands of women at this conference. Lisa travels the world, and she speaks in front of hundreds of thousands of people every year. Back in July, Stephen Furtick invited her to speak at Elevation, and she literally blew the roof off that place. I've watched that sermon a couple of times, and it was absolutely phenomenal. We reconnected about 8 years ago, and I told her that I wanted her to come to CrossPointe one weekend and speak here. Now, I know she's highly sought after, and she goes to, churches with thousands and thousands of people. But before she could say no, I reminded her, I gave you a microphone in high school. And you literally destroyed our band. You owe me this. So she was like, yeah, let's do it, and I'll call my Aunt Darlene and tell her you're going to get in touch with her, and we'll set something up, and I'll come to CrossPointe one weekend. So Lisa's going to come and speak at CrossPointe. Lisa and Christine Kane. Christine is another very well-known speaker in the Christian church, and I be honest with you, I shouldn't say this, but I didn't follow Christine, and she has like 1 million followers on Instagram, almost as many as I have, and I was really impressed by that. So anyway, before I play their video, because they're going to say hello, let me just tell you, I got tired of getting into fights in middle school because Tracy is a girl's name. So in high school, I started using my first name and went by Franklin. My friend shortened it to Frank. So here's Lisa and Christine Kane from Sydney, Australia, to say hello to CrossPointe.
Hey, CrossPointe, this is Lisa Harper and Christine Kane calling in from Sydney, Australia to say congratulations on 15 years. That's unbelievable. I have known Frank since high school. He's the one I told you about. We were in the band together.
This is Frank from the band.
This is Frank from the band.
Awesome.
So anyway, we're so excited about what God is doing there. Frank, I can't wait to come see you and your congregation. Congratulations.
Congratulations, CrossPointe. Well done.
I'm Frank from the band, just in case you didn't know. Listen up, living in the moment with no thought for tomorrow is an anthem for this generation, but I want to tell you, and that was just an example of the point I'm trying to make, I want to tell you, the people you let into your life today, the choices you make right now, will frame your future. Be good and kind, love everybody, but you need to be a lot more specific and a little bit more peculiar about who you decide to do life with. When Lisa comes, if you get a chance to talk to her, I'd like for you to help me out with a couple of things. Be sure to be really positive about our high school band because she remembers that a little bit differently than I do. And if you talk to her, just say, hey, I heard y'all were in a band together. PT said it was awesome, and the Lord will forgive you for that lie, okay? And also, I need all of you to call me Frank when she's here because she has no idea my name is actually Tracy, so... But let me remind you that God has a plan to prosper you, not harm you, to give you hope in the future. Now, one more thing before I move on, and I want to pull some principles out of this story. If you stomp on someone else's dream, throw it, throw them under the bus or down a well and then lie about it and say, I didn't do it, a lion came out and drug them into the bush, that doesn't make your dream bigger or better than theirs. In fact, it just makes you mean and vindictive, and mean Christians are not really Christians at all. And that has nothing to do with this sermon, but I thought it was good, so there you go. Anyway, I graduated high school, literally married the girl of my dreams, and we started living the dream together. We preached revivals and crusades all over the southeastern U.S. for a couple of years. Then the denomination we were part of asked us to take a small church in Bradenton, Florida. After that, we moved to a church in Orlando, and then I was invited to come to North Carolina to be the pastor of a little country church called Gold Valley in Spring Hope. I loved living in Gold Valley. It's God's country. In fact, some of my best friends are still there, and they actually were sitting right over here last night. We had 6 of my former church family at Gold Valley that came out to celebrate with us last night, and it was awesome to get to see them. And we stood around for about an hour after everybody else left and had a great time last night. But here's what happened. In my 3rd year at Gold Valley, all hell broke loose in my life. I was as miserable as a preacher could be. Our church wasn't growing, and the way I was leading offered no hope for reaching more people. God was dealing with me about grace because I was a legalist. I thought that doing church meant you kept all the rules and you did everything right. You crossed the T's and you dotted the I's. Well, God used a wonderful couple to reach out to me, and they tried to steer me in the right direction there at Gold Valley, but I wasn't ready to understand the power of God's amazing grace. A few weeks later, I walked into a Lifeway bookstore, Christian bookstore in Rocky Mount, North Carolina, to buy communion cups, but God ordained that communion that month, and there was a display at the front of the store that had the book called The Grace Awakening by Chuck Swindoll. I went home and I started reading The Grace Awakening. And let me tell you, grace exploded in my heart. It was like a revelation that I needed. Sylvia was a bit freaked out because it was like somebody flipped a light switch on in a pitch dark room. But for me, I was just like blind Bartimaeus. I knew Jesus was close and I was ready for a breakthrough, so I was just screaming, Jesus, have mercy on me, have mercy on me. And Jesus said, what would you have me to do for you? And I said, Lord, that you would open my eyes so that I could see. And Jesus said, according to your faith, be it unto you, because I have a plan to prosper you, to give you hope and a future bigger than what you're in right now.
Yes.
My eyes were opened, and suddenly there was a grace awakening. About a year ago, I reached out to Chuck Swindoll, and I shared this story with him. His secretary asked me to write it up and send it in so they could share it on their radio program. I did, and they did. And then a few weeks ago, I reached out to Chuck and told him that I'd be sharing that same story of my grace awakening with CrossPointe today. So he sent a greeting, and I'd like for Sylvia to come and share it with you.
Dear Tracy, it is with great delight that I write this letter congratulating CrossPointe Church on 15 years of faithful, grace-filled ministry to the good folks in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and beyond. I pray our Lord's richest blessings upon CrossPointe Church, upon you, Tracy, as you continue to lead your congregation, and upon those whose lives have been and forever will be changed through the uncompromised preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ. May grace abound as you celebrate this significant milestone for your church. Warmest regards, Chuck Swindoll.
Cool. Chuck is one of my heroes. He helped steer me in the right direction. When I wouldn't listen to anybody else, I was willing to listen to him. Grace, amazing grace, had come alive in my life and ministry. Now, remember Joseph? He was pretty excited about his dreams, and he shared his dreams with the wrong people. I was so excited about my newfound grace discovery that I worked it into literally every sermon after that and really pushed the limits in another denominational church that wasn't quite ready for all of that. The next thing you know, the door closed on us there, and God gave us a dream for another church. This is where y'all come in. A church where we could tell people, it doesn't matter where you've been, it doesn't matter what you've done, God's more concerned about your future than He'll ever be about your past. And you can belong before you believe. We wanted this to be a place where every person who drives under our cross and walks through our doors would be welcome, wanted, and valued, regardless of where they were on their spiritual journey. But I had never started a church before, and I needed some help, so God began to strategically move people into my life. I remember before we ever had our first service at CrossPointe, I got a call from a really close friend. He was a prominent leader in the denomination that the doors had just closed on us from, and he called to just encourage me. And that was kind of to his own detriment because it was kind of a hostile environment back then, and so he reached out when probably it would have been better for him not to. But he said, Tracy, you can do this. You're responsible now for a group of people that God's going to place under your care and in your ministry. He said, be brave and courageous, and God will direct your steps. My friend's name is William Wilson. Today, he's the president of Oral Roberts University. ORU maintains a student enrollment of 4,000 to 5,000 every year, offers 65 undergraduate degree programs along with a number of master's and doctoral degree programs. Out of over 600 major Christian college universities in the U.S., ORU is consistently ranked in the top 50 along with Emory University, Baylor, Pepperdine, Brigham Young, and Southern Methodist. When you have a college president in your future cheering you on, it's hard to stay down for very long. You'll hear from Billy in just a few moments, and he's got a great message for CrossPointe. Right after we started CrossPointe, one of the greatest Pentecostal organizations in the world reached out to us, and they offered us an affiliation to come and be a part of their organization. I was unsure, and I was confused, and I didn't know which way to go. Did I want to go back into a denomination and be a part of that and have a covering and some accountability, or how was we going to structure our church? So I reached out to a local pastor who I'd only met one time and didn't know him all that well, but Pastor Al Bryce of Covenant Love Church. Covenant Love is a mega church in Fayetteville with over 5,000 active members, and I had only met Pastor Al once before, but I got up from my prayer time in that little metal building on Legion Road, and I walked outside because the cell service back in those days sucked in a metal building. You couldn't get any coverage. And I called Pastor Al. And he wasn't available, but his secretary promised to give him my message. But before I could turn and get back in the building, my cell phone rang, and it was Al again. And I told him about the denomination, and I told him about them offering us an affiliation. And almost immediately, without hesitating, he said, Tracy, don't do that. He said, I'll help you. You don't need that. You don't need to go back. You need to move forward. You need to just, call me anytime you get stuck, and I'll walk you through it. We'll help you with bylaws and all that stuff and get you set up the right way. I can't begin to tell you how much Pastor Al and his wife Tava have helped our church. He gave me this, that day before I got off the phone, he gave me his private cell phone number. Now again, he's pastoring thousands, and I'm a church of, about 100 people, and this guy's saying, hey, call me anytime, here's my private cell number. And I strutted back into that little metal building like I was a humdinger. I had a skip in my step, and I believed what God said. I have plans to prosper you and not harm you, to give you hope and a future. So anyway, here's a message from two of my heroes, Billy Wilson and Pastor Al Bryce.
Hello, I'm Dr. Billy Wilson, president of Oral Roberts University, and I just want to say happy anniversary to CrossPointe Church. God is using this ministry to touch North Carolina and all around the world. And I want to say especially today that I'm proud of Pastor Tracy. Tracy, your drive, your leadership giftedness, and your love for people has made a big difference over the last 15 years. Have a great day, and remember, your best days are ahead of you and not in the past, and God's hand is on your ministry to do great things for Him. Happy anniversary.
Pastor Tracy and Sylvia and family and CrossPointe family, God bless you. Happy 15th anniversary from Pastor Al and Tava and our whole congregation at Covenant Love Church. God bless you guys. We're so proud of you.
We certainly are. Such a joy to be a part of this family right here in the Fayetteville region. Well done. We're so excited. We'll see more and more good things to come.
And you haven't seen anything yet. By the end of this year, you're going to stand back and say, wow, look what the Lord has done, because you're going to see great increase, more salvations, more miracles are going to take place and happen. Y'all are awesome. We love you. Happy anniversary.
Awesome people right there. My family and I had a meeting in our living room way back in March 2004, 15 years ago now, and mutually agreed to start a brand new church. We had no people, but we were stepping out in faith. But people started hearing about our new venture and began singing or signing up for what we were going to do, and they believed in what we were trying to accomplish and wanted to be a part of the journey. There are not many charter members left at CrossPointe anymore, but there are a few of us. There were about 15 in last night's service, but if you're a charter member and you were here when we first started, would you stand to your feet? I think we've got a few in the room this morning. All right, there's a few of us here, yeah. I think there's about 20 total that are still hanging out, and I salute you because you know me better than anybody else in the room, and you're still here. So that's pretty great. I knew we had to disciple and train leaders and volunteers, and back in those days, I was looking for people that were doing that at a really, really high level. And so I heard about Saddleback Church in Southern California, and I hopped on a plane and headed to Southern Cal to meet Rick Warren and to learn everything I could learn about discipling believers. And a big part of our ministry model today is very similar to that of Saddleback Church. I reached out to Rick to thank him for the help and the inspiration. I reminded him of our encounter several years back. He remembered us, and so he sent us a really nice greeting, and Josh is going to come and share that with you.
He writes, Pastor Tracy and CrossPointe Church, congratulations on celebrating your 15th year anniversary. Way to go. God is using your church in a great way to fulfill his purposes for his kingdom. Thanks for being an example of what matters most, transforming our world by changing lives for Christ. Many people will spend eternity in heaven because CrossPointe was faithful to reach out to the lost and the hurting. I'm encouraged by the incredible sense of hope, energy, and joy you're experiencing by discovering what God put us on this planet to do. I'm praying God will continue to use you and your church family to make a difference as you follow Christ with purpose and inspire others to do the same. God is with you. Signed, Pastor Rick Warren, Saddleback Church.
Cool. Rick's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, is still a #1 bestseller on the New York Times, and I think about 35 million copies and still running. If you don't have a copy of that book, you should. It'll change your life just as it did our church. When we moved our church to the old YMCA building in Hope Mills, we experienced growth, but I found out not everybody that comes to church is sent by God. Sometimes the devil sends people to try to stop what God is doing. And again, everybody that is with you may not be for you. And sometimes you can be tempted, listen, I'm just speaking from my own experience, but you can be tempted to compromise what you believe to hold on to people that you need to let go. That's true for everybody in the room. That takes us back to Joseph's story. He had the favor of God on his life even after being sold into slavery. He ended up serving Potiphar, the captain of the palace guard, and everything Joseph did was it was highly favored by God. I mean, he was experiencing the favor of God. Therefore, everything in Potiphar's house was reaping the benefits of God's favor just on Joseph's life, and he recognized that. And the Bible says that Joseph was a handsome guy. He was physically fit. Trying to give you a picture so you could relate. Potiphar's wife made a play for Joseph, and she pleaded with him to come to bed with her. He refused, saying that his master had entrusted him with everything in the palace and had withheld nothing from him except her, his wife. But she was relentless and apparently angered when he continued to refuse her. So one day, she literally tries to pull Joseph into her bed. She grabs a hold of his garment and doesn't let go. He ran and left his garment behind, but she showed his garment to Potiphar, her husband, and she cried rape. Joseph ended up in prison. He had to be wondering what God was up to, but he continued to be faithful, and God showed him favor even in a dungeon. Now, most of you were not around when about half of our church tried to drag us right back to a dungeon that God had delivered us out of. Like I said, I was trying to hold on to people that I needed to let go. And I didn't know what to do, but I stumbled upon a DVD series by Jim Cymbala on prayer. And I shared it with our small Wednesday night crowd. There was usually only 20 or 30 of us, but I thought if I can get 20 or 30 people praying at CrossPointe, God can give us a breakthrough. And that's exactly what happened. God gave us a breakthrough, the one that we were looking for, and He began to move some problems out and helped me to refocus on our dream and what He called CrossPointe to do. When it was all over, I sent an email to Jim Cymbala to let him know how much that his ministry had helped our church. And again, much to my surprise, he emailed me back and he said, Pastor, why don't you bring your leadership team to Brooklyn Tabernacle, sit in our weekly staff meeting, and then attend our Wednesday night prayer with about 1,500 other people from the Brooklyn Tabernacle Church. I jumped up from my desk after reading his email. I ran into Sylvia's office, really composed, and said, we going to New York. Yes. We rented a van which was loaded with mostly women. Let me just say, because it needs to be said, you haven't lived until you've tried to navigate New York in a 15-passenger van into Brooklyn with a bunch of old women telling you how to drive. I'm just saying. But Jim Cymbala taught me how to pray again, how to really get a prayer through. It was a powerful time. I mean, really, how to get a prayer through. He's been a great friend of this ministry. Most of you have heard of Jim or the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir led by his wife, Carol. Sylvia and I got to sit down and have dinner with them. It was a wonderful time. 6 Grammy Awards and 5 Dove Awards. And Jim has a message for you guys today.
Congratulations to Pastor Pounders and the CrossPointe Church congregation on a great milestone, 15 years of serving the Lord Jesus Christ. Congratulations from Pastor Jim Cymbala, my wife Carol, and the entire Brooklyn Tabernacle congregation.
Amen. Awesome. Y'all didn't know I was so connected, did you? You just thought I was a hick from the sticks. I know exactly what you thought. Sometimes you get in ministry and you get stuck. You go through dry seasons. It happened to Joseph time and time again, and it's happened to CrossPointe all along the way, okay? And I want you to see this, and I want you to get it. God brought people into Joseph's life during the worst of times, and He's done that for us over and over again. About 18 months ago, we hit a wall that I didn't see coming. I felt defeated, depleted, busted, bruised, and battered. It was a bad wall. That's when God strategically placed Perry Noble in my life. Perry is the founding pastor of New Spring Church in Anderson, South Carolina. At the peak of their growth and all that God was doing there, that they had 18 campuses and somewhere around 50,000 members. We attended a conference at New Spring right before Perry was let go by his board. I felt like they should have given him a sabbatical and given him time to work things out, but that's just me, and I'm a mercy, grace-filled guy these days. There were 3,000 pastors at that conference in the room, and when I heard Perry speak, man, I was just blown away. And Josh will tell you, and Micah, he would speak, and I'd lean forward, and I'd say, I love this guy because he was so much like me. He's real rough around the edges, and he just speaks from his heart, and he tells it like it is. But he got let go through some issues and problems of a church that he founded, which I felt like was totally wrong. But one day, about 18 months after the conference, after he had been out of ministry for about a year, Josh walks into my office and he says, hey, you want to go and meet Perry Noble? And I was like, yeah. And he says, well, he's invited us to come down to Anderson. He started a brand new ministry, and he's helping churches that feel stuck get unstuck, and he's doing a phenomenal thing to help churches grow. And I said, man, I'm all in. So me, Micah, Josh, and Brother G, we went down and we spent 2 days with Perry in Anderson. Now, Perry helped me get personally unstuck in ministry, and he inspired me to press on in pursuit of my vision. And I told Perry about my father's encounter with Bigfoot. True story, down on the Okefenokee Swamp, and that's a great story. Perry didn't believe it any more than what you're going to believe it when I tell you someday, because he doesn't believe in Bigfoot, but me and his secretary, Logan, we had some great stories to share about Bigfoot. And then I told Perry another story about a little confrontation I had in a Sam's Club parking lot. I don't know if you've ever heard about that. And we just clicked. He's like, man, I so want to do that someday. He said, I think it'd be therapy just to pull somebody out of a car and beat them down. And so, I didn't encourage him any because there are some legal ramifications to all that. But he was in Israel not long after that, and he told me, he said, man, we were walking the streets of Israel on a God trip, you know, and he said there was a guy that confronted our girls, and he kept pawing on them. He said, and I thought about you. He said, because I just wanted to, he said, I got right up in his face, and I was wanting him to do something, and the girls were telling him, behave yourself. You can't be like PT. That's a true story. Since we first met with Perry, CrossPointe has increased weekly attendance by over 300 people. Now, that may not be a big deal to you, but it's kingdom work that I'm passionate about. Perry wanted to say hi, so check this out.
What's up, CrossPointe? I am so pumped about 15 years of ministry, and to think that God used Pastor PT. No, I'm just kidding. He seriously is one of the greatest men, greatest encouragers that I've ever met in my life. And I know what God has done in his first 15 years is just a preview of what's going to happen over the next 15 years. Because in Christ, the best is always yet to come.
Amen. Perry launched another church, Second Chance Church in Anderson, a couple of months ago, and he's already got about 1,000 people attending that church. He's just an incredible person when it comes to church growth. We've had a lot of help and a lot of incredible people cheering us on. We have a wonderful sister church in Tupelo, Mississippi. I don't know if you're aware of that. I preached there a few weeks back and had an awesome time. And you're going to hear from their pastor, Kevin Ray, in our last video. They already have a 1,000-seat auditorium, and I ain't jealous. Not one bit. But I have decided that we're going to build a 1,200-seat auditorium. We're actually meeting with architects and trying to get all that done. We skipped a step that they told us we had to go back and do, and we'll fill you guys in a few weeks on all that's going on with our building program. But Kevin's church started the exact same Sunday 15 years ago that our church started. We did this together. We launched together. And we've helped each other all along the way. He's got about 1,000 people in his church there, and they're doing phenomenal things for the Lord. You'll also hear from Tony McVickers. Tony was actually here last night, and I spotted him on the back row. He was here even though he's now the senior pastor of Rockfish Church, and they were having church last night. And when I recognized him, he tried to hide. He didn't want them to know. But Rockfish, your pastor was here last night when he was supposed to be over there with y'all. I love you, Tony. I love Tony Mack. Rockfish is an awesome 3,000-member congregation, and he's a great friend, and he's a confidant for me, and you got to have people like that in your life. And then finally, you're going to hear from my accountability board, Dr. Mike Thompson, Bascom Smith, and Randy Dockery. Those are the guys that can discipline or fire me if I ever have a moral failure in my life as a pastor. And actually, I would correct that and say those are the guys that will plan my funeral if I ever have a moral failure. Because Sylvia concealed carries, and I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't survive it. Check out this last video.
Happy anniversary, CrossPointe. Just wanted to chime in and tell you we're so excited about the 15 years you guys have been going. I know you've had some challenging days. We have. But our best days are just ahead of us. And I wanted to take a moment to tell you how pleased we are with the progress you guys are making. So have a wonderful anniversary, and we love you.
Hey, CrossPointe. This is Tony McVicker, Senior Pastor of Rockfish Church. I want to say happy 15th anniversary and keep moving the kingdom forward. Keep making Jesus big in our community. God bless you and congratulations.
I just wanted to say hello to my friends, Pastor Tracy and Sylvia Pounders, and wish a heartfelt congratulations to CrossPointe Church on its 15-year anniversary.
We wanted to take just a quick moment and wish you a happy 15th year anniversary. We also want you to know we love your pastor, Pastor Tracy.
And we love Miss Sylvia, too.
We also want them to know that when we grow up, we want to be just like them. Have a great day.
And happy 15th.
We just want to say congratulations to CrossPointe for 15 years of ministry. We're excited about what God has done, where God has brought you from, and where God is going to take you.